Hello, I'm Patrick, 33 years old, and I've dedicated nearly 7 years to my current company. Life's quite enjoyable, wouldn't you agree? All is well. I reside in a quaint town, not too distant from the city where I earn my living, allowing me to enjoy a delightful blend of serene existence and the bustling pace of professional life. Each morning, I rise, make my way to the gym, engage in focused training, nourish myself properly, and then proceed to the office. I've consistently maintained my fitness with a healthy diet and a solid workout regimen, and I take pride in my appearance. Not many individuals my age still possess the determination, but I refuse to let opportunities pass me by. I'm single and haven't been in a committed relationship since my previous marriage. We were young lovers in high school, and I tied the knot with her at 24. However, by the time I turned 27, I discovered her betrayal. I caught her cheating. She claimed it was a mistake, that it held no significance, yet I found it impossible to move past it. I lacked the resolve to continue, and we ended our marriage. Since that time, I've maintained a rather uncomplicated lifestyle. Just me, my routine, and the occasional night out with friends, no kids, no complicated relationships. My life is quite simple. I hold a position as a senior analyst at a mid-sized technology company. The task is demanding, yet it's well within my capabilities. It's a role that demands concentration, yet once you master it, you find yourself seamlessly navigating through the tasks. That's been the case for the past few years, and to be honest, I have no objections to it. While my job doesn't ignite a fire within me, it does cover my expenses, and I find it relatively low stress. Isn't that what the majority desires? Simply aiming to navigate the day with minimal fuss. That day began just like all the rest. I rose at 6 a.m., engaged in a workout, enjoyed a swift breakfast, and made my way to the office. I've grown accustomed to it at this point. The city isn't too distant, yet navigating through during peak traffic is always a challenge. I wasn't feeling particularly down or anything, just the usual state of affairs, you know? But around 5 p.m., just as I was finishing up my tasks, an unexpected message popped up on my phone. The message was from Mr. Harrison, my superior. Patrick, I would like you to remain after work today. I must speak with you right away. This was rather peculiar. Mr. Harrison was not one to prolong meetings unless there was a matter of great importance at hand. I swiftly navigated through my thoughts. Did I make a mistake? Have I overlooked a deadline? Yet, I found myself at a loss for any misstep I might have taken. We have just completed a project, and I had been managing everything effectively. However, the idea of being summoned to his office after hours filled me with a sense of discomfort. I might have been analyzing it too much, yet that feeling lingered with me. Ultimately, engaging in a debate seemed futile. With no plans for the evening, I quickly replied to him, letting him know I would stay. I assumed it would be a brief discussion, likely revolving around a final report or an update on the upcoming project. The office began to empty around 6:30 p.m. I arrived late, yet the venue was nearly deserted. The cleaning team was already making their rounds, vacuuming and meticulously wiping down surfaces. I experienced a peculiar feeling of solitude. The structure exuded a stillness that bordered on the unsettling. As I sat at my desk, perusing my emails, the unmistakable sound of the elevator doors sliding open caught my attention. It felt peculiar. I didn't anticipate the presence of anyone else. Suddenly, the door to my office swung open. It certainly wasn't Mr. Harrison. It was his spouse. Mrs. Harrison. I stood still. What was she doing in this place? Wasn't she meant to be at home? Our conversations had been few and far between, yet I was aware of her presence. She had made a few trips to the office for events or company gatherings. However, that was all there was to it. She entered with assurance, clad in a polished, professional ensemble. Nothing overly extravagant, simply elegant. I rose to my feet, a swirl of confusion enveloping me. I was completely in the dark about what was happening. She offered me a smile. "Hey, Patrick," she said, her voice filled with warmth. It felt almost excessively warm for someone I hardly knew. I'm pleased you decided to remain. I was the one who requested you to remain, not my husband. I blinked several times. Could she really mean that? Excuse me? I whispered, still trying to make sense of it all. Did you really want me to remain? She gave a slight nod. Indeed. My husband is currently occupied with meetings, and I wanted to have a conversation with you. My mind was in a whirl. What could possibly make her want to have a conversation with me? My mind began to wander to the darkest possibilities. Perhaps there was a problem with something I did, and now her husband has tasked her with addressing it. Yet, I found myself puzzled by her decision to engage with me directly rather than communicating through him. How are you doing? I inquired, attempting to maintain a relaxed tone, yet I sensed my anxiety beginning to rise. Her smile returned, carrying a sense of reassurance this time. I'm doing well. I simply wish to have a conversation with you. I found myself grappling with the complexities of it all. What brought her to this place? What was it that she desired? Could it have been merely a miscommunication? It was hard to pinpoint, yet there was a depth in her gaze, an unspoken message that indicated this conversation transcended the usual work-related banter. And then, she revealed the shocking truth. I was thinking it might be nice to head out for a bit. Take a moment to breathe, cruise through the city streets. This week has felt endless, and I find myself yearning for some companionship. Her words completely disoriented me. How about a drive under the stars tonight? Alongside her? It was a peculiar sensation, yet undeniably captivating. Initially, I found myself at a loss for words. It caught me off guard, yet I was never one to back down from a challenge, and I certainly didn't want to appear as someone who couldn't embrace a bit of unexpected adventure. Absolutely, that sounds great. I spoke, my voice wavering slightly, as I aimed to avoid any semblance of rudeness. With that, I slipped on my jacket, and we departed the office side by side. We exited the office, and I trailed behind her to the parking lot. The evening air was sharp, the city lights dancing on the pavement as we strolled along. She guided me to her vehicle, a polished black SUV that appeared far more luxurious than what I typically encountered in my everyday life. It was evident that she and her husband enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle, a luxury I could never attain, even with my respectable income. The entire scenario felt utterly dreamlike. Mrs. Harrison, striking and self-assured, impeccably dressed, was inviting me, a guy she hardly knew, to spend time with her on an ordinary Tuesday night. Thoughts surged through my mind, each one a potential avenue to explore. Was this a kind of evaluation? Was she attempting to play games with me? Perhaps this was simply a fleeting instance of her desire to break free. Yet, an unsettling sense lingered within me, suggesting there was something deeper at play. She swung open the passenger door, and I paused for a moment, contemplating before sliding into the seat. As we navigated the serene streets of the city, the headlights sliced through the darkness, illuminating our path. She was cruising a bit quicker than I might have preferred, yet I kept my thoughts to myself. What is this really about? After a moment of quiet, I inquired, attempting to shatter the stillness. I found myself uncertain about the situation, yet I thought it best to inquire. She cast a quick look my way, a gentle smile gracing her lips, her eyes sparkling with a hint of playful allure. I simply had to escape, you understand? At times, existence can feel like a whirlwind, and a pause is essential. No one else I know would abandon their plans and join me like you did. I was still coming to terms with the reality of her invitation. As she continued to speak, the atmosphere grew increasingly peculiar, yet there was an undeniable thrill in the air. Her voice wrapped around me like a gentle embrace, and I couldn't help but notice that her presence infused the night with an unfamiliar magic, something beyond my usual experience. We meandered through the streets, engaging in casual conversation about the mundane. Initially, I maintained a casual tone, inquiring about her family and how her husband was faring at his job. I aimed to avoid any conflicts, and the last thing I wanted was to create an uncomfortable situation by saying something inappropriate. Gradually, she began to reveal more of herself. She shared with me the weight of her existence, the solitude that occasionally seeped in. It felt as though she was on a quest, seeking a bond or perhaps merely a way to express her pent-up frustrations. It was difficult to discern, yet I could perceive it within her gaze. A fragment of her existence felt unfulfilled, even amidst the ease of her daily life. "You needn't put on a facade around me," I remarked after some time, my tone gentler than normal. "I hold no judgment against you. If you feel like sharing, I'm here to listen." She regarded me for a brief moment, as if weighing the choice of placing her trust in me. Then she smiled once more, yet this time it felt distinct, more sincere. "Thank you, Patrick. That means a lot to me." And that was the moment everything changed. As we drove on, she unexpectedly veered onto a less traveled road, one that was unfamiliar to me. The glow of the city began to dim, leaving us enveloped by shadowy, forlorn streets. I felt a sense of unease, though fear eluded me. The atmosphere was unmistakably altered. My heart raced with a heightened rhythm. Is this the moment when I was meant to feel uneasy? I did, yet I found myself uncertain whether it was the place or the circumstances that influenced my feelings. We paused in front of a quaint, inviting diner, one of those spots that stays open around the clock and seldom sees any patrons. She brought the car to a stop and turned to face me, her gaze locked onto mine. "Would you like to meet for a coffee?" she inquired, her tone soft, as if beckoning me into an experience that transcended a mere casual drink. I found myself unable to refuse. Uncertainty enveloped me, yet this night was destined to linger in my memory. As we entered the diner, she guided me to a secluded booth at the rear. The establishment was devoid of patrons, save for the waitress, who offered us a fleeting, indifferent look before returning her attention to her phone. The atmosphere was serene, punctuated only by the soft clinking of cups and the gentle hum of the refrigerator nestled in the corner. We sat facing one another, the soft glow of the dim lights creating shadows that danced across the table. She ordered coffee, and I did the same. "So, tell me," she started, her tone shifting to one of gravity. "How's life treating you, Patrick? What's it like to be, well, you?" I took a moment to reflect. It was a question I had never encountered, especially not from someone seated across from me in a diner at this hour, far removed from the ordinary. I reassured, aiming for simplicity in my words. "Well, I head to work, hit the gym, and spend time with friends, but it's really just the same old routine. I don't give it much thought." She nodded with contemplation, savoring a deliberate sip of her coffee. "Absolutely, I understand. Sometimes, life unfolds in unexpected ways, doesn't it? Merely a customary practice." And then, she took an action that completely caught me off guard. She leaned in, drawing nearer, her hand poised delicately on the table. "Yet, it need not remain so, correct?" Her voice was gentle, yet it struck me with the force of a blow to the stomach. I was at a loss for words. What was her message? Was she in search of something deeper? Is there something beyond the idyllic existence she shares with her husband? Before I could fully grasp it, she suggested that perhaps we could discover a way to escape the monotony. The phrases lingered, thick with ambiguity and weight. Her gaze was fixed on me, not with a playful smile, but with an intensity that spoke volumes. I was uncertain of her meaning, yet the palpable tension between us was unmistakable. An implicit recognition that a change had just occurred in that instant. For a brief moment, I remained still, paralyzed. What was I meant to express? Should I bring it to attention? Or simply allow it to remain in place? I cleared my throat, striving to organize my thoughts. "I'm not quite sure I understand what you're saying, Mrs. Harrison." She remained steadfast. Instead, she offered a subtle smile. "Perhaps that moment will arrive for you shortly." And with that, the evening began to take a turn I hadn't anticipated. A place we never intended to find ourselves. Yet here I was, unable to retreat, and uncertain if I even desired to. The upcoming days at the office felt peculiar. I attempted to maintain an air of normalcy, yet beneath the surface, all was not well. Whenever I encountered Mrs. Harrison in the office, my thoughts would inevitably drift back to that night. The way she gazed at me, the words she spoke, it lingered in my mind. The light-hearted chats we shared afterward now carry a weighty significance. It felt as though we shared a silent connection, one that remained unspoken between us, never brought to light. That was her preference, I guess. And for some inexplicable reason, I allowed it to unfold. I moved through my responsibilities, executing my duties with my typical precision, yet my thoughts continually drifted back to her. She moved through the office like a whisper, each step radiating a familiar elegance and assurance. She appeared more aloof at work, as if she were attempting to pretend that the night had never occurred. Yet, I wasn't the sole person aware that it had. The tension between us was palpable, impossible to overlook. Each encounter carried an undercurrent, an elusive quality that defied my attempts to articulate it. Just when I believed I could finally move on, another message from her arrived. "Patrick, would you be able to join me for a coffee chat? It's time for a conversation." I acted without a moment's pause. I understood the essence of it. I was completely in the dark about her intentions, yet I had no intention of rejecting her offer. I returned to the cafe we had visited that evening, settling into the familiar booth, making an effort to mask my anxiety. As she entered, her simple black dress draped gracefully around her, and her hair was styled to enhance her natural elegance effortlessly. She noticed me and offered a subtle smile before taking a seat across from me. "Do you understand the reason I brought you here?" She spoke, her tone gentle yet earnest. "I must set the record straight. What transpired between us?" I nodded, feeling at a loss for words. I had a multitude of questions and thoughts swirling in my mind, yet I chose to remain silent, patiently anticipating her words. "Patrick, I'm at a loss for words." She started, her gaze drifting away from mine, if only for a brief moment. That evening, my thoughts were clouded. I'm in a committed relationship, and I realize now that it was inappropriate for me to invite you out like that. It was an error, and I hope you understand it didn't signify anything important. The words struck me with the force of a sudden blow. I found myself caught in a swirl of emotions, uncertain whether relief or disappointment was the prevailing feeling. A part of me had clung to the hope that there was something deeper at play, yet the truth was gradually becoming undeniable. She had a spouse. This was always destined to be just a singular occurrence. "I understand," I replied, making an effort to maintain a calm tone. "It caught me off guard, yet I comprehend." She gazed at me, her eyes probing my features, as if attempting to discern whether I truly comprehended. "I simply wish to clarify that there is no room for misunderstanding. This cannot go on any longer. Patrick, I must put an end to this." I nodded once more, yet beneath the surface, a knot twisted tighter in my stomach. I had hoped to be the one to bring it to a close, but hearing her voice made it feel like a sudden jolt of pain. We lingered in silence for a few moments, the gravity of the conversation suspended in the air between us. I longed to express my feelings, to convey that it wasn't finished for me, that I wasn't prepared to let go of what we had experienced together, yet the words eluded me. It just didn't sit well. At last, she shattered the stillness. "It seems more beneficial for us to simply move forward. Patrick, let's just move on from this, all right?" Parting was not my desire, yet deep down, I understood it was the necessary choice. "All right," I replied, the words leaving a sour aftertaste. "I will let it slip from my mind." As she rose to depart, a wave of regret washed over me. I never wished for things to conclude in this manner, yet I grasped the reasons behind it. She was bound in matrimony, living her own existence, and despite my resentment, I found myself excluded from that world. "Thank you for being understanding," she said softly, and with that, she exited the cafe, leaving me to ponder in solitude. The future was a mystery to me. Uncertainty lingered in my mind about whether I could ever truly erase that night from my memory. Yet, one truth stood out: whatever had transpired between us had come to an end, and acceptance was my only path forward. It's amusing how life can lead you to unexpected destinations. A few weeks had gone by since our coffee chat, and the dynamic between Mrs. Harrison, her name still felt strange to utter, and me had returned to an oddly familiar rhythm. At work, everything continued to unfold in the same familiar manner. I adhered to my regular responsibilities and maintained my routine, attempting to avoid dwelling on the night we shared, on how we had only skimmed the surface of what was unfolding between us. Yet, a transformation had occurred within me. It became impossible to overlook any longer. A magnetic force seemed to draw me back to her, and even with her unmistakable boundaries, I couldn't dismiss the sense that this was more than a mere fleeting error. It was the way she gazed at me that evening, the way her fingers brushed against my arm while we sat in the car, the way her voice quivered just a bit when she bid farewell. I was certain this wasn't the end. Neither for her, nor for me. A few days later, the message arrived. Clear, straightforward, much like the rest. Patrick, we must have a conversation. Are you available to meet this evening? Identical location. This time, I acted without hesitation, free from second thoughts or overthinking. I simply responded with a brief yes, and that concluded the matter. A feeling deep within me whispered that this experience would be different from the last. This time, there was no disguising it as an error. I arrived at the cafe at the same hour we had gathered previously. Upon entering, my gaze fell upon her at the familiar table. She appeared as she always did, graceful and composed, yet there was an unmistakable shift in her gaze. She awaited my arrival, and the palpable tension between us lingered thickly in the atmosphere. "Hello," she murmured gently, offering me a faint, tentative smile as I took my seat opposite her. "Hey," I responded, attempting to keep my tone light, though my heart raced in my chest. A palpable tension hung between us, as if we were both on the brink of an unspoken revelation, yet neither could pinpoint its nature. She was quick to act. "I've been reflecting on the events," she began, her gaze drifting away from mine for a brief moment, "and I can't shake it from my mind. I realize I mentioned we shouldn't move forward, but it's hard for me to simply let it go." My breath hitched in my throat. This was the moment. I've anticipated her words for so long, but hearing them spoken brought an undeniable sense of reality. Thoughts surged through my mind. I felt the urge to express my thoughts, to convey that she had occupied my mind just as much, that I had no desire to let go of those feelings, yet all I could manage was a nod. "I comprehend," I murmured, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. She locked eyes with me, her gaze probing, as if attempting to discern the truth of my words. She leaned in a bit, her voice dropping to a whisper, as though the words she was about to utter could be overwhelming if said too loudly. "I can no longer act as if what transpired holds no significance, and while I recognize that I ought to refrain from this, my indifference prevails. I long to see you again, Patrick. I long to see you once more." Her words enveloped me like a powerful tide, sweeping me away and submerging me in their depths. I found myself at a loss for words. I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, unsure whether to embrace joy, succumb to fear, or experience a blend of both. This was occurring. As she expressed her thoughts, I found myself unable to resist sharing in that sentiment. This was something I desired as well. I spoke, my voice slightly raspy now. I scanned the cafe with a hint of anxiety, yet it appeared that no one was paying attention. "I'm uncertain about how we can navigate this, yet I'm equally reluctant to let it go." A subtle, knowing smile played on her lips as she extended her hand across the table, her fingers grazing mine softly. The contact sparked a thrill through me, and I was unable to ignore the palpable tension that hung in the air between us. "Then we'll figure it out," she murmured gently, her fingers brushing against mine for a fleeting moment before she withdrew her hand. I nodded, working to calm my breath. We were both aware that this would not be straightforward. Complications loomed large, risks piled high, yet we remained unfazed. The urge, the longing, it was impossible to overlook. "Let's not share this with anyone else," she said, her tone grave. "It remains a secret, for now at least." I accepted without a moment's doubt. The hidden allure, the excitement it brings. It contributed to the overwhelming sensation, the undeniable correctness of the moment. We were acutely aware of the repercussions should this information leak, yet we were prepared to embrace that gamble. Once our drinks were finished, silence enveloped us. We were both aware of the course of action that lay ahead of us. After she settled the bill, we strolled out of the cafe, embracing the refreshing night air. Without a word, she offered a fleeting look, a subtle smile, and then turned to leave. As I stood there, observing her fade into the darkness, it dawned on me that this had evolved beyond a mere fleeting moment. This marked the onset of a far more intricate journey, and I was completely unaware of the destination it would take me to. Yet, after what seemed like an eternity, a sense of vitality surged within me. The days following that night felt like a haze. The weight of our actions settled upon me more profoundly than I had anticipated. There was a thrill, undeniably, a fervor that quickened my pulse each time she crossed my mind, each time I caught sight of her at work. Yet, there lingered a sense of trepidation, a worry about being discovered, a concern for the repercussions, not solely for myself, but for her as well. She had a spouse. She shared a life with her husband, Mr. Harrison. What were we up to? And yet, each time I laid eyes on her, I found myself unable to resist. She would offer me a fleeting smile, her eyes shadowed with mysteries, and that was enough to bring back the reason we embarked on this journey. The rush, the excitement of the taboo. The allure was undeniable, and retreat was not an option. We maintained a low profile at the office. All remained unsuspecting. She remained the familiar Mrs. Harrison that everyone recognized. Refined, sophisticated, and wholly committed to her partner. I was still that same Patrick, the individual who simply went about his work and maintained a low profile. Yet, beneath the facade, everything had transformed. On a Friday evening, her message found its way to me once more. Let's rendezvous at our regular spot this evening. Please ensure you arrive on time. The excitement surged within me as I absorbed the text before me. The familiar spot, it seemed like our own private language. A smile crept onto my face at the sheer absurdity of it all. We were both grown-ups, yet we had somehow found ourselves entangled in this peculiar, perilous game. That evening, I arrived ahead of time. I required some moments to collect my reflections. This time, I found myself uncertain about what lay ahead. Would this night unfold in the same way as the past, or could it take a different turn? As she entered the room, I could sense her presence without even catching a glimpse of her face. She exuded an aura, a subtle assurance that drew attention effortlessly, even without any intention on her part. She noticed me right away, as though she had been searching for me among the throng. Silently, she approached my table with purpose. "Hi," she said, her voice a blend of warmth and caution. She smiled, yet a glimmer in her eyes revealed that her thoughts mirrored my own. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice light, even as the tension simmered between us. We skipped the small talk. She took a seat, and we immediately addressed the matter at hand. "I need to discuss something with you," she said, her tone now grave, more grave than it had been the previous night. A palpable shift enveloped the atmosphere, as if the very mood had transformed in an instant. An unsettling intuition gripped me, whispering that this conversation held the power to alter everything. "What thoughts are swirling in your head?" I inquired, inclining my body just a bit. The insatiable curiosity gnawed at my thoughts. After a brief pause, she inhaled deeply. "I've been reflecting deeply on our situation, on the two of us, and while I'm cautious about making hasty choices, I also feel it's important to avoid continuing down a path that might cause pain to anyone involved." The impact of the words was more profound than I had anticipated. I had anticipated that this would not be straightforward, yet hearing her voice struck me like a blow to the stomach, amplifying the doubt that had been hovering in my thoughts. "Are you implying that you wish to cease?" I inquired, striving to maintain a calm tone. I found it hard to admit that I didn't want it to end, that it had been the most wonderful experience I'd had in months, perhaps even years. She gently shook her head, a slow and deliberate motion. "That's not quite it. I'm uncertain about what I desire, Patrick. This goes beyond mere physical intimacy, it's... Your well-being is important to me. I believe I'm developing feelings for you, and that frightens me. I was utterly astonished. The phrases she uttered were precisely what I had been striving to keep unspoken, yet hearing her voice them brought a sense of reality to it all. Incredibly authentic. I'm married, she continued, her voice now a mere whisper. I find myself in a dilemma. I can't simply walk away from him, yet I also can't continue this in secrecy. Her words enveloped me, pulling me down into a deep abyss. This had evolved into something much deeper. It was more than a daring, thrilling escapade. It turned out to be something far more intricate, far more perilous than we had ever expected. So, what are our next steps? I inquired, my voice wavering just a bit. She averted her gaze for a brief moment, as though contemplating something too agonizing to articulate. As she turned her gaze towards me, her eyes shone with clarity and resolve. It's time for you to make a choice, Patrick. I can't continue down this path if it's only going to result in sorrow. The stillness that enveloped us was overwhelming. The gravity of her words, the truths I had been sidestepping, felt overwhelmingly heavy. I understood that this situation couldn't last indefinitely, yet I found myself uncertain about whether I was prepared to confront the repercussions of my decision. Text, I don't want to lose you, I whispered, the words slipping out before I could hold them back. Yet, I also wish to avoid causing you any pain. She extended her hand across the table, her fingers softly brushing against mine. At that point, a decision must be made. I'm prepared whenever you are. The choice lay in my hands now. The burden pressed down on me, leaving me uncertain about my next steps. I inhaled deeply. My fingers gripped firmly around the rim of my coffee cup. The uncertainty churned within me, yet I recognized that this was the pivotal moment. This had transcended our individual concerns. It surpassed the hidden truths we had been navigating, transcending the excitement of our clandestine escapades. It revolved around our evolving identities and the lengths we were prepared to go. As I gazed at her, I noticed the identical fear reflected in her eyes. Yet, there lingered another feeling, perhaps a glimmer of hope. She lingered, anticipating my words, seeking my decision. She relied on me to make a decision, as I sensed that, beneath it all, she was hesitant to take that step herself. She required my encouragement, my assurance that it was acceptable, my motivation to help her let go of everything. And I couldn't accomplish that unless I had confidence in myself. I leaned in, my voice calm yet resolute. I've contemplated it extensively. I understand my desires, yet this situation can no longer continue as it is. Not while you remain in that marriage. Her eyes grew large, a blend of relief and unease dancing within them. She was caught off guard, yet deep down, she sensed it was inevitable. What are you trying to convey, Patrick? I meant to express my desire to be with you, though my words didn't convey it that way. Instead, I expressed that if we are to be together, it cannot solely be this secretive affair, lacking a genuine future. A decision must be made. It's time to make a choice, either you end things with him, or we step away from this entirely. The silence stretched on, lingering in the air. She remained silent initially, her gaze fixed on me as if she were contemplating each word, each potential result. Her thoughts were clearly in a whirlwind. She was fully aware of the repercussions. She understood precisely the implications of this situation, and I recognized that it wouldn't be simple for her, yet I couldn't hold on indefinitely. The burden was too heavy to bear, a constant shadow looming over my existence, filled with the dread of discovery and the uncertainty of her true feelings for me. It was unjust for both of us. I needed to ensure her complete commitment, or we would have to bring it to a close. I refused to be a mere accessory in her existence, regardless of the depth of my feelings for her. At last, she uttered a word, her tone softer than it had been, nearly a breath of sound. You're requesting that I make a selection. I gave a slight nod. Indeed, I am. She inhaled deeply, the sort of breath one takes when faced with a choice that will alter the course of everything. She cast her gaze downward for a brief moment, and when she lifted her eyes again, her demeanor had shifted, exuding a newfound determination and clarity. I've been steering clear of this, but you're absolutely correct. This can't go on any longer. I remained silent. I simply waited. She had to complete it. I love him, she said, her voice strained, but I'm no longer in love with him. I've been aware for some time, yet I've hesitated to acknowledge it. I fear losing it all, yet I can't continue this way. I desire to be by your side, Patrick. My heart raced with excitement. Her words were exactly what I had longed to hear, yet I understood that this was merely the beginning. She needed to make that initial move, rather than merely discussing it. What does that signify? I inquired softly, striving to maintain control over my feelings. She gazed at me with a strength I had never encountered before. I will inform him. I'm going to express my desire to leave. I will take care of it this evening. I found myself at a loss for words. A wave of relief washed over me. Another part of me felt a deep sense of concern for her. This was poised to shatter her entire reality. However, if she was prepared, then I needed to honor that decision. Do you really think so? I inquired, careful not to impose, yet aware that this was a significant choice. She nodded, her gaze fixed intently on me. I have no doubt. I have come to a decision. And in an instant, everything transformed. The burden of the past few weeks seemed to evaporate, replaced by an unexpected tranquility that enveloped me. The uncharted path stretched before us, yet we were ready to confront it side by side, free from the shadows of fear and uncertainty. We lingered in silence for a moment, fully embracing the weight of the reality before us. As I extended my hand towards hers, it was a modest action, yet it resonated with a significance that eclipsed everything I had ever experienced. Thank you, I murmured. She squeezed my hand, a faint smile gracing her lips. We'll find a way, Patrick. In unison. In that moment, it became clear to me that I was closing one chapter while simultaneously opening another. A chapter where we could openly embrace our emotions without the need for secrecy or concealment. A chapter in which she found herself fully immersed, no longer caught between two realms. We were aware that the path would be fraught with difficulties, yet we had committed to this journey. She had selected me. For the first time in ages, a sense of hope for the future washed over me. The conclusion of our hidden truth marked the start of something genuine,